Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Electric vehicles are taking market share away from internal combustion competitors, with new plug-in vehicle registrations in 2023 growing 45% a year over 2022 and accounting now for 18% of all vehicle sales worldwide. U.S. EV sales, however, have only hit 7.9% of all new car sales over the past 3 months. In Silicon Valley speak, EVs are nearly across the chasm, the point at which a new product category is poised to rapidly displace older products. The question you're probably asking is, yeah, but can I afford an EV? Our guest today is Peter Glenn. He's CEO of EV Life, and they're working to make the answer to your question an affordable yes with EV-specific auto loans. EV Life works with EV shoppers to pre-qualify them for a loan. They apply the available rebates and federal tax credits that buyers typically have to wait to claim on their federal and state taxes to lower the monthly payments on an EV. So basically, you get those benefits up front. For example, EV Life lets you select a car. Let's say it's a Tesla Model S long-range model, and you see the monthly payment before any add-ons that you might choose for the car, along with the monthly savings you'd realize with the company's EV climate loan financing program. Peter started EV Life out of frustration with his own experience at car dealerships when he was shopping for an EV in 2019. The dealerships didn't have accurate information about rebates and tax credits, and government agencies failed to make that information easy to find and use. So EV Life was born with a mission to help people find the information they need to buy the right electric car for their needs. Electrification will be the driving force in reducing transportation-related emissions. So let's see what it takes to get into the driver's seat. You can learn more about EV Life at evlife.co. That's evlife.co. Hey, welcome to the show, Peter. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Mitch.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's always interesting to talk to somebody who's starting a new company, and you don't come from a finance background. So what was your journey to starting EV Life, an EV financing company?
I've always been passionate about making a positive, doing things and building things that make a positive impact in the world. I started in activism in my teens, working on climate change activism and preserving forests in Portland, Oregon, where I just grew up surrounded by nature. In my 20s, I worked abroad in Tanzania and East Africa. I taught, and then I worked in renewable energy. And I think the inciting discovery that had the biggest impact on why I founded EV Life and why I'm so obsessed with helping drive down the cost of electric vehicles is actually an experience at a prior startup. So I was an early team member at Phoenix International. I led business development, some marketing there. And we had a really innovative solar product that could help folks living off grid in East Africa to start. Basically have access to lighting and power to charge phones. The product was like $150 or so. We partnered with telecoms like Vodafone to distribute it. But the product just wasn't selling at a really fast clip, and we knew we had to do something. And so I was part of a team that started developing financing solutions. And where we landed was developing a 30 cents per day solar lease that over 18 months, a customer could buy the product. And all of a sudden, we made the price of solar for folks that had no access to the electric grid a total no-brainer, because they're paying more than 30 cents per day for energy. That product scaled up to over 3 million users over the next few years. And it was really exciting to see that company grow and scale and get acquired by ENGIE, a big French energy company. And they continue to scale across Africa today and provide energy access. When my co-founder Kevin and I started working on EVs and specifically looking at how do we solve or how do we help alleviate the problem of EV affordability through EV Life, we really landed on a similar challenge, which is the upfront price of EVs is just too large. It's $10,000 to $20,000 more than an equivalent ICE vehicle. And that kind of trade-off, that kind of calculus is really difficult for customers to grok, because you're also thinking about a new way of driving, right? Like, how do I charge this thing? Can I charge it at home? What's public charging like? And so for me, and for our team now that's growing since we founded the company back in mid 2019, Um, our focus has been on how can we drive that price down. Today, it's focused on post-purchase tax credits and rebates, helping customers qualify for them, actually giving them credit for qualified EV incentives up front. Tomorrow, we continue to innovate on new ways that we can help a customer pull forward some of the unique values that we can underwrite with an electric vehicle and help drive down the cost of electric vehicle adoption for folks so they can save 100, 200 or more dollars and start to see like more of a no-brainer price on an upfront basis and when they drive off the lot in an EV. So just really passionate about using technology to connect with people and impact. And that's really what led me to work on EV Life and hopefully continue to have this impact on building a cleaner, more sustainable world in the long term.
Well, and you mentioned $100 or $200, but that's per month based on the experience I had using your calculator.
Correct. In states, especially when you pair the electric vehicle tax credit with state rebates and other programs, we can really drive down the savings.
Well, so I've seen dealerships offering things like green loans, and of course they finance EVs. So what does EV Life do that those companies don't?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are you seeing in terms of green loans? I see a lot of especially with credit unions. I think my credit union in the Bay Area and others offer maybe like a rate discount of like 0.25%, something like that.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I've seen it from my credit union. I've seen it advertised on billboards.
That's great. I think rate discounts are significant. If you can take advantage of them from your bank or credit union, I think that every little bit counts. You should certainly take them up on that. I think the problem that traditional auto lenders have today, especially the big banks and larger lenders, is that they think EVs should be financed just like a gas car. And
Right.
they're ignoring that huge green premium, right? $10,000 or more versus an equivalent gas vehicle. So a rate discount helps, but it's really just inching you just slightly better than what the standard offer is. They're also ignoring those government discounts, the tax credits, the rebates. Even thinking about underwriting, they're missing kind of fuel and maintenance savings that could total $1,400 or more a year. They're also kind of undervaluing what the long-term residual value of the vehicle will be, given like that the battery has a higher scrap value than a gas car. And so we're developing a model really for underwriting electric vehicles and saving customers money on EVs up front. We're starting with qualifying tax credits and rebates, helping you navigate those things. We're now about to start enabling you to bundle in a charger to your financing, and continuing to iterate on ways that we can help the customer save more and more money up front and at every step in their EV journey once they drive off the lot.
So I pre-qualify for a loan. I go through the process, and your site really is focused on ease of use. It's an impressive experience. What happens after I get pre-qualified, and how does your loan get to the dealership and I get my car?
Yeah, so there's something interesting happening. There's a digital transformation that's happening alongside the electrification of transportation. And one of the biggest drivers, right, is that Tesla and Rivian and others, but Tesla, that sells more than half of the EV sold in the United States this year, has no franchise car dealerships, right, and has largely an online purchase process. It's direct to consumer. We're also seeing consumer preferences change. Millennials and Gen Z customers that by and large are our customers coming to our website, they see going to the dealership and haggling over the price for 3.5 to 4 hours on average. It's like going to the dentist or the DMV. It's not a desirable experience. And so we're also building for the customer at EV Life. You can come in, you can get 100% online pre-qualification, then submit your loan application if you're qualified, and we can get you into your car in as little as 24 hours. And basically we work with you. It's really easy to work with like the online purchase processes, like with Tesla and Rivian and others, because they're not trying to, like a franchise car dealership is trying to make money on financing as well. So that's a challenge in terms of working with them sometimes on the business model. But for the online vehicles, the pure EV companies, that don't have franchise dealers, we can help you get that financing transferred really quickly. And then for franchise dealers, we still have great ways to interface with them and again, send a wire transfer, get that car funded as quickly as we can, as little as 24 hours, and then have you go pick up your EV or have it delivered to your home.
So you're getting rid of all that paperwork process that I just find tedious about buying a new car, because it does take hours just to sign the paperwork. And I've read some really glowing reports about how you go at the extra mile to get that car to somebody, say over the weekend. How's the handoff work? I'm still trying to understand what I would do. I walk in and I say, I'm pre-qualified with EV Life. The dealership knows what to do with that information these days.
We if you're going to a franchise dealership, we'll help talk you through the process of what you need to take to the dealer, what you need to get from the dealership to send to us. It's fairly simple and straightforward, though. And once we have, the equivalent of an invoice and verify some documents with you as the customer digitally, we can approve your loan and wire the funds directly to the dealership or to Tesla or another online OEM, and just finalize that transaction as quickly as possible.
Now, you mentioned that you're now starting to work on bundling and a charger system and other sorts of things. One of the questions I wonder about in terms of buying an EV, and I've bought a couple now, is should I buy the extended service coverage because of the battery and the potential to replace the battery? Or are there programs coming online to address the maintenance of the battery over the course of the life of the car?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that if you have an extended insurance program that looks interesting and affordable and it feels like it meets your needs, I think by all means you should consider it. I think the good news is that when we look at the data, and there's admittedly not as much data about electric vehicles and the battery life as we would like. With an ICE vehicle, we can look back, almost 100 years and take a look at how performance worked, residual values over time, resale values, scrap values, right? So we're working from a smaller amount of historical data, but we have some friends at Recurrent Auto, and they're focused on like tracking battery health. And they've done some really interesting studies. I can send you a link afterwards. They found that the majority of vehicles in a recent study retain 90% of their capacity through the first 100,000 miles, and that's across all EVs that they're tracking. And most batteries are expected to retain 70% of their useful life throughout the life of the vehicle. And then also that batteries, at least in the 15,000 vehicles I believe they studied, only 1.5% have actually been replaced by customers. Now, some recalls, like you think about the Chevy Bolt recall, like Chevy replaced those batteries, so they're not factored in. But customers need to replace batteries. 1.5% of 15,000 vehicles. That feels pretty small for me when you consider we're looking way back to the Nissan Leaf of the early 2010s, and the Nissan Leaf battery technology has come a really long way since then too. And most of those batteries haven't been replaced either. So you think about that. You also think about how the batteries themselves are going to have higher scrap value. Like batteries, outside the vehicle, once they complete their useful life, they'll have second and third careers, right? A battery could go, once it gets to maybe 70% or below 70% of its useful life, maybe it has less range. Maybe it becomes a city driver. Yep. Or if it goes outside the vehicle, it can provide grid like demand response. It could be like a virtual power plant on the grid that actually earns money for storing energy and putting it back on at peak times and getting paid more by utilities for putting energy on the grid. And then once it reaches a point where it just doesn't retain enough energy, many decades from now, perhaps, it can be sent off to a company like Redwood Materials, which can recycle 95% plus of that battery content, turn it into a new EV battery or a new grid battery, and really make use of those materials. So we see a strong, we believe that in the absence of historical data, that we're pleasantly surprised about battery performance and have a higher degree of confidence about those batteries holding up over time.
Another thing that you've mentioned several times is the green premium. Tesla recently started to move some of its pricing even below comparable ICE vehicles. Do you feel like the era of the green premium is beginning to pass? And will it potentially even be less expensive because of the incentives you're talking about to buy an electric
Yeah,
vehicle?
so that would be great. We want to live in a world at EV Life. At EV Life, we want to help create and usher in a world where driving an electric vehicle the price is obvious and is obviously less on an upfront basis than driving or buying a nice vehicle. Um, we think that the Tesla price cuts have been helpful. And when you think about the Tesla Model Y and the Tesla Model 3, Tesla Model Y, I think in a lot of folks' minds, comes in as a luxury vehicle,
Yeah.
but it's actually starting around $43,000, which is about $2,000 less than the average new car has sold for this year. Now, new cars by and large are costing more and more coming out of COVID. And so there's some price adjustment there. But then you compare the Tesla Model Y or the Tesla Model 3 to like more like commuter cars like Honda Civics, Toyota Camrys, Toyota Corollas. You're still $10,000 to $15,000 more than those vehicles. And I think that that's the calculus we're really trying to work to improve. It's like, how does a middle class American thinking about a commuter car like a Camry or Corolla or a RAV4, like compare that to a Model 3 or Model Y or any other electric vehicle? Ford Mustang Mach-E, for example, is a great one.
Mhm.
Compare it to those vehicles and then, make the choice. I'm going to go electric because I know that this price is going to be a no-brainer up front. It's going to be very, very close to parity. And then once I drive it, I know that I'm going to pay much, much less for fuel maintenance. I'm going to be saving $1,000, $1,500 a year just on fuel maintenance as I drive it.
Taking that full lifetime view of the price is something that we're not used to doing. This is a great place to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back to continue talking with you. Let's return to the conversation with Peter Glenn. He's CEO of the auto financing startup EV Life. Peter, inflation and higher interest rates are on everybody's mind these days. Have you seen an impact on EV sales from these higher interest rates? Are people holding off?
I think people are holding off on new vehicle sales across the board. And it's certainly reflected in EV data, but I think it's reflected for ICE vehicles as well, almost evenly distributed. And so I think that solutions like what EV Life is developing, where we can help you pull forward the savings from your post-purchase tax credits, state and local rebates, into financing, let you use it like a down payment to lower your monthly payment, is one of the new and novel methods out there that can help customers save. And so we're actually seeing an increased demand for solutions like ours, like what EV Life is offering, because we can lower monthly payments despite this macro environment where the interest rates are higher and probably will persist to be higher, at least close to this level until the end of 2024.
What are some of the hot selling EVs, or what's popular these days?
Yeah, the Tesla Model Y is incredibly popular. As you may know, it became the best-selling new car in the world this year. It surpassed the Toyota Corolla for best-selling car in the world globally, best-selling new car. Tesla Model 3 is also popular. I think on the more affordable end of the market, the Chevy Bolt and the Chevy Bolt EUV are both incredibly popular with our customers. And then we'll finance a handful of, RAV4 Primes and Rivians and other vehicles that are gaining in popularity.
Do you see any real contending brands emerging to challenge Tesla? Because Elon and company have such a huge lead in the market right now. They're 10 times as many cars produced as the next largest American producer.
Yeah,
Who should we be watching?
good question. Well, it's difficult to predict the future, but the thing that I'm most interesting to watch, it's difficult to predict the future, but the thing that I'm most interested to watch in the coming year is what happens when other automakers like Ford and GM jump onto or enable their customers, new vehicles, their electric vehicles, to join and charge on Tesla's NACS charging network, their public charging network. Anecdotally, between talking to customers and friends about electric vehicles, folks that own, Ford Mach-E's, for example, or Chevy Bolts, they love the vehicles, but they all have a charging story where they
Yeah.
were out public charging on a road trip. Sometimes they're with their kids and like it's raining and there's more components to it than that, but like the charging network failed. And
Yeah.
those stories really get back to like other folks that are thinking about buying EVs. I've never heard somebody complain who's a Tesla driver complain about having like a charging network fail. Sometimes they'll talk about how the charging network was a little backed up on like a holiday like Thanksgiving weekend or something. But other than that, like the Tesla network is the only truly reliable public charging network today. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens when those brands that are building great EVs, get access to Tesla's public charging network, how that might change the mindset of the EV buyer and how it might expand the market for other brands that are building great cars but don't have the great charging network today.
Well, that's interesting because what it also suggests is that Tesla is poised to become the gas station replacement in addition to the car replacement.
Absolutely, and I think it was exciting and also not surprising to see that BP is actually investing heavily in getting in on the Tesla charging network and helping operate a lot of these chargers. It seems like very tangential to their business model, and I think the more we could see traditional kind of energy companies that have a lot of fossil fuels in their portfolio also start to get market share in clean energy and providing fuel for electric vehicles. I think that it's exciting to see them in the game and playing big in that space.
Now, you mentioned Rivian earlier, and Rivian and Ford's trucks are another category which is just starting to come to market. Are people embracing that, and are truck people embracing that?
Yeah, it's difficult for me to comment on that because we haven't financed more than a handful of Rivians so far. I think that there's a lot of excitement about the trucks. I think it really is a mindset shift for a lot of Americans because a lot of folks are truck people and they have real good reasons for wanting to own trucks for their business or for adventure. And there haven't been great trucks on the market until very recently. So it's exciting to see them there. I know there's also buzz coming out about when the Cybertruck will be out, and that's one other truck that I think has a lot of anticipation behind it. The Dodge EV as well. It's really difficult to say like where we're going to land with that, but I'll say that it's exciting to have them on the market because I think it opens up the imagination of more Americans that electrification could be possible, that they don't have to ditch their truck if they feel like they're truck people.
A lot has changed in the market since before COVID. In 2017, 34% of cars were leased, and last year it was only 20%. Do you see us moving back to ownership as the right model, or would you recommend somebody consider a lease for an EV?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that this shift from leasing to kind of normalizing towards the market, the overall electric or the overall ICE vehicle market in terms of how folks finance these cars and finance more of them versus lease is a good sign that people are feeling more comfortable with the technology, both the range and the technology of the car, and then also the charging networks are becoming more comfortable. In a lot of senses, folks were kind of apprehensive in the early days or the early years of electric vehicles, that first decade of EVs. Like, will the battery kind of just stop working suddenly one day? Will there be much better technology or much better range in the next vehicle? And I think those trends of improvement will continue to improve, and I hope there are leaps forward. But I think this is a good sign that folks want to, by and large, finance more than lease today, because it's a sign that the technology is feeling much more comfortable and trustworthy to Americans who are buying EVs.
Now, you've also talked earlier about recycling and the importance of reuse of these materials. Have you looked at potentially having EV Life change its business model so that you are essentially the owner of the asset and steward the materials like the lithium in the battery or the aluminum in the chassis as a long-term asset, and that then creates financial opportunity that you can pass along as savings to your customers?
We're always looking for ways to pass on savings to our customers, and we're definitely running the numbers on different ways outside of incentives that we're able to pull forward future savings. I think the batteries is something we're looking at, but we haven't announced anything around it yet. I will say this about the battery. I think there's a lot of talk about the batteries and the mining and the resources that have to go into building this clean energy economy. The exciting thing for me, I think that there's certainly areas that we can and need to improve when it comes to the way we source some of these materials. But the exciting thing is once we build the batteries, we already have the opportunity to create a very, very closed loop when it comes to taking batteries that have a useful life in a vehicle, help power the electric grid, and then go back into a recycling plant like Redwood Materials has built and be able to upcycle those batteries into completely like new high performing EV batteries or grid storage, whatever you want. That's something we've never seen before in clean energy, is that potential for a closed loop. At the risk of stating the obvious, you can't recycle gasoline or you can't recycle coal once it's extracted. It's a one-time use thing. But with batteries and both as storage outside the vehicle and inside the vehicle, the closed loop on batteries, as we get better and better about closing that loop, is really, truly exciting.
Well, the whole idea of closed loop, as I said, motions, excuse me. Sorry, Doug, and we're going to cut that and start over here. 3, 2, 1. The notion of circular products is really going to change the way we think about everything. And you're looking at this full life cycle relationship between the owner and the vehicle. Have you looked at, for instance, calculating carbon savings and helping them monetize that so that, you'd be earning carbon credits for not burning the gas you were just mentioning a moment ago?
Yeah.
That again would lower your cost. Are there a lot of those kinds of mechanisms for savings out there that we haven't unlocked yet?
When it comes to savings, EV Life's North Star is how can we be the number one place for a customer to save time and money on an electric vehicle. So we are always looking out for those opportunities. Today, from our understanding, carbon credits and carbon credit capture, at least if you look at states like California with more mature carbon markets for electric vehicle related charging, a lot of those credits are monetized already on the charging side. And so folks that have charging networks or utilities that help customers kind of manage their charge typically aggregate and take advantage of those carbon credits today. But we're always on the lookout for new ways to help capture that value that's being generated, right, by reducing your carbon emissions and pass that on to the customer.
Well, essentially what you're talking about is today, because they can aggregate all of the volume of the carbon savings, they can monetize it easily. You do have the mechanisms to sort of move that to the edge of the network where the individual car is part of that. Is it simply a matter of being able to track better in the long term?
It's tracking, and it's also it's mainly through the charging. So if we have a charging touch point, or companies that already have charging touch points have really built some of their mechanism or some of their supplemental revenue around carbon credits. I would say it's not a primary revenue stream for any folks that I talk to that run different types of charging platforms.
Well, as you think about the auto market of, say, let's 2035, what kinds of services and charging programs do you think might be built into the price of the vehicle if renewable energy is widely available?
Yeah, I mean, I before we talk about the future state where renewable energy is widely available, I just wanted to note that even on really coal fire grids, in China that are arguably pretty polluting compared to American grids. EVs still run cleaner than gas-powered vehicles there, and that's according to Bloomberg. So I think that, and that's really largely because EVs are so much more efficient than combustion engines, just full stop.
Yep.
So I think the future of clean energy is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. California's grid is one of the greenest and cleanest in the country. And, if you're running an electric vehicle, on the grid in California, it depends on when you charge, but on average, the alternative fuels data center from the government says that that vehicle is going to have about a tenth of the emissions of an equivalent ICE vehicle. So I think that there's huge impact, and that those emissions are going to continue to go down over time as the grid gets cleaner and cleaner across different states in the United States and across the world. I think there's really exciting opportunities there. How pricing could be built into that as it becomes widely available? That's a good question. And maybe I'll flip that one back to you. What kind of trends do you see happening?
Could you, for instance, because of our ability to project the cost of renewable energy, just make charging part of owning the car, and you wouldn't necessarily be charged for using the energy?
Yeah, interesting. I think the emerging areas that I see in that space are around demand response, or some folks like to talk about virtual power plant usage, right? The idea that your electric vehicle to start could, if you could charge at certain times where there's a lot of excess renewable energy on the grid, you could actually help pull that off the grid.
Yeah, you virtualize the demand.
Yeah. So long term, I think vehicle to grid opportunities where you could plug in your battery and allow your battery to both take in power and then send power back to the grid during peak times and get paid for it. Just kind of like how Powerwalls and equivalent backup batteries in markets like California and Texas already get paid for that. That an individual EV, and we're talking about millions of EVs on the road, could actually become this distributed backup power source that can help support the grid and help create more reliable electricity, especially when demand is high. I think that long term is one of the most exciting areas where electric vehicles could really help the grid stay even cleaner all the time, because you kind of always have this backup power that you can go to. In the short term, I think being able to even incentivize customers to charge at times where there's excess clean energy on the grid that can be taken off at select hours. There's already certain programs that are pricing for that and helping customers save money. I think it would be great to see more of that, have customers, EV drivers, more aware of those opportunities so they could continue to create this virtuous loop of like pulling that clean energy off the grid, storing it in their car at those opportune hours.
Again, it's the notion of ownership changing in a way. As you're pointing out, we can participate in supporting the grid. We can disconnect and go off on our trip, but we can think about, and there are tools increasingly available for participating in supporting everyone else's electric use. And that it's interesting. I mean, EV Life is potentially one of those aggregation points of that kind of information and those services. I would imagine your business strategy meetings are fascinating conversations.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just trying to save customers time and money on driving electric, to make the idea of going electric fun and exciting and a no-brainer, like just an easy, fun experience to get into. And I think if we can create that kind of world where people want to be a part of that world, that's we'll really have achieved our goal. And we're certainly not going to do it alone. We're part of a great ecosystem of climate tech innovators that are building exciting things in EVs and clean energy and beyond.
Well, Peter, how can folks follow along with what EV Life is doing?
Yeah, so if folks are interested in saving money on financing an electric vehicle, getting support with their EV journey, or just exploring, they're curious about learning more about driving electric, they can go to evlife.co, not .com, but .co, and find us there. That's the best way to follow along.
Well, Peter, thanks very much for spending time with us today. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking with EV Life co-CEO Peter Glenn, and you can visit evlife.co to learn more about the company and price dozens of EVs. You might find the car of your dreams at a price that beats the full lifecycle cost of an internal combustion vehicle. Check it out. The financialization of life over the past 50 years has delivered good and bad outcomes for all of us. As Peter explained, those tools could be turned to positive use by connecting car owners to savings such as reduced charging costs and other benefits based on the ability to track how the vehicle is used, its ability to send power to the grid when it's parked, for example, or potentially by passing the value of carbon emissions avoided to the individual vehicle owner instead of the charging network keeping all of that extra value. Now, that requires a more connected lifestyle, which represents a new co-ownership scenario, perhaps. We may own the car, but have made a commitment to send the used battery to a processor who pays us today or over time for the lithium that they will recover when the vehicle reaches its end of its useful life. Another potential change in the era of car sharing could involve being paid for the use of your car when it would otherwise be parked, and that's 95% of the life of the average vehicle. So this connected lifestyle, even when it's kind of challenging, can help us make more of every natural resource that we take the time and effort to extract from the planet. And that could bring society back within the carrying capacity that Earth has for us each year. We're currently burning about 1.7 Earths per year in terms of our resource consumption and pollution, and now we need to change it. There are lots of changes ahead, so stay tuned to find out what will happen next. I hope you take a moment to share this podcast or any of the more than 430 interviews that we've done on sustainability in a year. In fact, I think it's 440 now. Writing a review on your favorite podcast platform will help your neighbors find us. You are the amplifier that can help all of us spread more ideas to create less waste. Please tell your friends, family, coworkers, everybody that you meet on the street that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, and all of the fine purveyors of podcast goodness out there. Just check us out. Thank you for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.